Excuse me, you need to step back. Coffee service is for paying customers only. Victoria Hayes paused, dish towel still in her weathered hands. I'm sorry. She looked up from wiping the counter at Fort Campbell's cafeteria. Colonel Davis pointed at her worn volunteer badge. This is a military facility. We can't have random civilians wandering around during operational discussions. Click. He tapped his pen against the table where 3 other officers sat in uncomfortable silence. Sir, she's been cleared. Major Thompson started. Thompson, I'm handling this. Davis's voice carried across the cafeteria. Ma'am, civilian volunteers need to maintain appropriate boundaries. Military conversations require security clearance. Victoria's hand instinctively moved toward the silent phone in her pocket, the one with direct access to Pentagon crisis management, the one that had shaped global military strategy for over 2 decades. Colonel, she said quietly, I understand your concern. That's when the phone rang with the tone that would change everything. Major Thompson had been watching Victoria Hayes for 3 days now, and something didn't add up. It wasn't obvious at first. She moved through the Fort Campbell cafeteria with quiet efficiency, khaki pants and white polo shirt with the Volunteer Services logo. Graying hair pulled back, nothing suggesting she was anything more than what she claimed. But Thompson had 20 years of military experience, and he'd learned to read people. The way Victoria organized the coffee station wasn't random. It followed military efficiency protocols most civilians never learned. When she restocked supplies, she used rotation methods that suggested logistics training. When she moved through the crowded cafeteria, she navigated foot traffic like someone who understood operational flow. Most telling was how she listened. Victoria Hayes heard everything. Not obviously, she never turned her head when conversations got interesting. But Thompson noticed her unconsciously positioning to maintain audio contact with different tables. Yesterday, when Colonel Davis discussed training schedules, Victoria had cleaned nearby much longer than necessary. Thompson, you're staring again, Captain Rodriguez mentioned yesterday. Just watching people work, Thompson replied. But it was more than that. This morning's incident confirmed his suspicions. Most civilian volunteers would have backed down immediately when challenged by a full colonel. Victoria Hayes had done neither submission nor defensiveness. She'd listened carefully, processed the authority structure, and responded with calm professionalism that suggested experience dealing with difficult personalities in power. Her body language hadn't shown intimidation. If anything, she'd looked patient, like someone waiting for a child to finish a tantrum. Sir, Thompson said quietly to Davis as Victoria stepped away. Maybe we should keep it down. Some conversations. Thompson, she's a volunteer. She serves coffee and cleans tables. That's it. Davis leaned back with satisfaction. These civilian volunteers sometimes forget their place. Important to maintain boundaries. But Thompson wasn't convinced. Military training created instincts hard to hide. The way Victoria moved, anticipated needs, positioned herself to observe without seeming to, it suggested institutional knowledge beyond volunteer work. Major Thompson. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes joined their table. Noticed you watching our volunteer staff closely. Something we should know. Thompson considered carefully. Professional curiosity, sir. Sometimes people aren't what they appear. You think she's undercover intelligence? Captain Rodriguez laughed. Come on, Thompson. Sometimes a volunteer is just a volunteer. Maybe. Thompson sipped coffee, watching Victoria efficiently manage 3 stations while staying aware of every conversation. But people with that situational awareness usually learned it somewhere specific. What Thompson didn't know was that Victoria Hayes had been conducting her own mission. As a 3-star general with oversight of strategic operations for West Command, she had access to performance reports and leadership evaluations for every base under her jurisdiction. Fort Campbell showed concerning patterns, nothing dramatic, but subtle indicators suggesting leadership issues affecting morale and effectiveness. Anonymous feedback mentioned feeling dismissed by certain officers. Training scores declined consistently. Most troubling were bias reports in how different service members were treated. So, General Victoria Hayes decided to see for herself. If you believe every service member deserves respect regardless of their current role, type respect in the comments. This gets explosive. Colonel Davis was in his element now, with junior officers watching, and a clear example of maintaining military discipline with civilians. The problem with volunteer programs, he continued, voice deliberately loud for Victoria to hear, is civilians don't understand military culture. They think helping out entitles them to the same consideration as actual service members. Major Thompson shifted uncomfortably. Sir, the volunteer program's been effective. At what, Thompson? Giving retirees something to do. Davis cut him off. Work gets done. Sure. But let's not pretend there's real value in their perspective on military operations. Victoria continued cleaning movement steady. But Thompson noticed her efficiency had increased, covering more ground faster, as if wanting to complete tasks and move away. Take our coffee server, Davis gestured toward Victoria without lowering his voice. Nice enough person, probably. Maybe has kids. Husband deployed somewhere. But does anyone think she has insights about base operations we need? Captain Rodriguez looked nervous. Colonel, maybe we should what? Pretend everyone's opinion is equally valuable. That's exactly the thinking weakening military effectiveness. Davis warmed to his theme. You've got to understand hierarchy exists for a reason. Experience matters. Training matters. Pouring coffee doesn't mean understanding strategic thinking. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes leaned forward. What exactly are you saying? Sir, I'm saying just because someone can serve coffee doesn't mean they understand strategy. Davis sipped his cup, enjoying the mentor role. Young officers need to learn evaluating people accurately. Can't lead effectively if you're constantly second, guessing instincts about who brings what capabilities. Thompson watched Victoria's reaction. Most people being discussed so dismissively would show emotion, anger, hurt, embarrassment. Victoria Hayes showed none. If anything, she looked like someone taking mental notes. Sir, Thompson tried again. We should be careful about assumptions. Thompson, career advice. Davis leaned back with authority. Military leadership requires quickly assessing people and situations. Can't spend time wondering if the janitor has hidden talents. Work with available information, make decisions based on demonstrated competence. But what if available information is incomplete? Thompson asked. Davis laughed. Then go with what you observe. I observe a middle-aged woman volunteering to serve coffee at a military installation. That tells me everything about her capability level and appropriate role. Victoria moved closer to their conversation. Thompson noticed her posture had changed. Nothing dramatic, but she carried herself with subtle authority that seemed at odds with the humble volunteer role Davis described. Colonel, Barnes said carefully, isn't there value in diverse perspectives? The Army's been clear about inclusion in decision-making, diversity of qualified perspectives. Yes, Davis replied. But there's a difference between including different backgrounds among trained personnel and pretending random civilians have military insights. A 30-year veteran from different background. Valuable. A volunteer with no experience, not so much. That's when Victoria's phone rang. The sound cut through cafeteria noise like a blade. Not a cheerful personal chime, but the distinct professional tone of a secure government device. Every officer turned toward the sound. Victoria froze mid-wipe looking at the device. "Ma'am," Davis called. "Personal calls should be taken outside." Victoria looked at him. Then at the phone ringing with Pentagon priority rhythm. 22 years of training weared with her cover mission. "I said outside," Davis repeated with clear authority. The phone continued in the sudden quiet. Other diners noticed the tension. Victoria Hayes looked directly at Colonel Davis and made her choice. "I apologize, Colonel, but I need to take this call." Victoria's voice carried quiet authority that made Thompson sit straighter. Something different about her tone, still respectful, but with underlying confidence that hadn't been there before. Davis's face wrined. "Ma'am, I gave you direct instruction. Personal calls wait until break time." "Sir, with respect, this isn't personal." Victoria held the ringing phone, its urgent tone cutting through atmosphere like a warning. "I don't care what kind." Davis stood, his colonel's authority on display. "You're a civilian volunteer in a military facility. When an officer gives direction, you follow. Period." The cafeteria went silent. Soldiers at nearby tables stopped eating, sensing confrontation. Victoria's calloused hand trembled slightly, setting down her coffee pot. Inside her pocket, a Pentagon phone held 22 years of command authority. Authority over the very operations Davis was discussing. Colonel Davis Thompson tried. "Maybe she should, Thompson, stay out." Davis's voice carried across the quiet facility. "This is exactly what I meant. Civilian volunteers who don't understand their place in military hierarchy." Victoria looked around, taking in dozens of service members, witnessing this public dressing down. Some looked uncomfortable, others enjoyed the drama. A few seemed to be taking mental notes. The phone rang again, second cycle indicating escalating priority. "Ma'am." Davis continued with full military authority. "You have 10 seconds to put that phone away and return to duties, or I'll have you escorted out, and your volunteer privileges permanently revoked." Sir Barnes spoke quietly. "Maybe we should." "Barnes, I'm handling this. Everyone's about to see how you maintain discipline and respect in military environments." Davis folded his arms. "Ma'am, I'm waiting." Victoria looked at the phone, the secure device connecting her to Pentagon crisis management. The same device she'd used coordinating strategic responses to international incidents, advising joint chiefs, participating in decisions affecting global operations. For a week, she'd observed how leadership played out at base level, how authority was exercised, respect earned or demanded, how chain of command functioned when no one watched from above. Now she was experiencing it firsthand. "Colonel," she said quietly, "you're right about hierarchy and respect. Military effectiveness depends on clear authority lines and appropriate responses to legitimate commands." Davis nodded with satisfaction. "Exactly. Now, please turn off." "But it also depends," Victoria continued, "on leaders understanding full context before exercising authority." The phone rang a third time. Priority escalation to emergency status. Thompson noticed Victoria's posture had shifted. She stood straighter with bearing of someone accustomed to command presence. Her voice carried calm confidence of someone who'd given orders in high-pressure situations. "Ma'am, you're out of line," Davis said, uncertainty creeping in. "I'm ordering you to Colonel Davis," Victoria interrupted gently. "Before you complete that order, You might want to know who you're giving it to. She answered the phone. General Hayes. The silence was total and immediate. Even kitchen sounds stopped as the words registered throughout the cafeteria. General Hayes. We have a developing situation in the Mediterranean. Satellite intelligence indicates coordinated naval movements requiring your immediate strategic assessment. Victoria's entire demeanor transformed. Her voice took on crisp authority of someone accustomed to decisions affecting thousands of lives. What's the timeline for my evaluation? 20 minutes, ma'am. Joint Chiefs are convening and need your input before making recommendations to the Secretary. Understood. Connect me to intelligence briefing. I'll need all satellite data and latest reconnaissance reports from the fleet. While Victoria listened to initial briefing, she observed the transformation around her. Colonel Davis had gone completely still, mouth slightly open in dawning horror. Major Thompson looked fascinated rather than shocked, as if puzzle pieces were clicking. Other officers appeared to be experiencing various stages of disbelief, but Victoria's primary attention was on the crisis thousands of miles away. General Hayes, we're seeing coordinated movement of 12 unidentified vessels in international waters 40 nautical miles southeast of Cyprus. Initial assessment suggests possible Russian naval assets operating without proper identification. Victoria's mind shifted to strategic analysis. What's our current naval presence? U.S. Roosevelt Carrier Strike Group conducting routine operations 120 mi west. 2 destroyers on patrol routes could reach the area within 6 hours. Intelligence assessment on vessel's capabilities and intent. Unknown, ma'am. Radio silence. Radar signatures don't match known civilian configurations. Behavior suggests coordinated military operation. Victoria began pacing behind the coffee station. Civilian appearance now, completely at odds with the authority in her voice and complexity of the situation she was managing. Recommendation: maintain positioning but elevate readiness to DEFCON 3 for regional naval assets. Continuous surveillance and immediate notification if vessels change course toward NATO territorial waters. Copy, General. DEFCON 3 for regional assets. Secretary requesting your assessment on escalation scenarios. Tell the Secretary premature aggressive posturing could escalate intelligence gathering into international incident. We need demonstrating capability without appearing provocative. Have Roosevelt Group adjust patrol route 60 mi closer while maintaining international waters. Show presence without aggression. Colonel Davis finally found his voice, barely a whisper. General. Victoria held up one finger, indicating she needed to complete the call. Around the cafeteria, personnel at other tables began realizing something extraordinary was happening. Funds were quietly pulled out. Conversations stopped entirely. General Hayes, we're also receiving reports of increased cyber activity targeting European military communications. Possible correlation with naval movements. Almost certainly. This is testing response patterns and coordination capabilities. Recommend immediate NATO cyber defense notification and Protocol 7 implementation for all European theater communications. Protocol 7 implementation? Yes, ma'am. Anything else? Hourly updates on both situations. If either naval movements or cyber activity escalate, I need immediate notification. And get me secure line to Admiral Richardson at EUCOM. We may need coordinated response planning. Understood, General. Hourly updates and secure connection to Admiral Richardson. Thank you, Colonel Martinez. Execute immediately. Victoria ended the call and looked around the completely silent cafeteria. Every face was turned toward her, expressions ranging from shock to awe to confusion. She turned to Colonel Davis, still staring with the expression of someone watching their world view collapse. Colonel Davis, I believe you had questions about civilian volunteers and their appropriate role in military facilities. Davis opened his mouth, but no sound came. There's no confusion, Major Thompson. Victoria's voice carried calm authority of someone who had just prevented potential international crisis during her coffee break. I'm General Victoria Hayes, Strategic Operations West Command. I've been conducting observational research here at Fort Campbell for the past week. She gestured toward her volunteer badge. This assignment was designed to observe base operations and leadership dynamics without complications that would arise from my presence in uniform. The implications hit the officers like a physical blow. For the past week, all their conversations, decisions, casual expressions of attitude had been observed by one of the most senior officers in their chain of command. Ma'am, Davis managed. I apologize. I had no way of knowing. Colonel Davis, you're right that you couldn't know my identity. But you had every opportunity to treat me with basic dignity and respect, regardless of what you assumed about my background. What followed was the most uncomfortable hour in Colonel Davis's 20-year career. General Hayes, still wearing her volunteer polo and khaki pants, conducted an impromptu after-action review that would become legendary throughout Fort Campbell and the entire Army leadership program. Gentlemen, she began addressing the 4 officers frozen at their table while the cafeteria evacuated to give them privacy. What happened today wasn't an accident. It was the predictable result of attitudes I've been observing throughout this base. Major Thompson leaned forward. General, what exactly have you observed? Systematic bias in how different groups are treated. Assumptions about capability based on appearance rather than performance. Troubling tendency to dismiss input from anyone perceived as lower in hierarchy. Victoria pulled out a small notebook. I've documented 17 incidents of officers making decisions based on presumptions about gender, ethnicity, age, or civilian status rather than actual evidence of competence. Colonel Davis felt blood drain from his face. Ma'am, I never intended. Colonel intentions matter less than impact. Leadership behavior effect is measured by how it influences unit cohesion, operational effectiveness, and junior personnel development. Victoria flipped through notes. Your interaction with me today was consistent with patterns I've observed in your leadership style this week. She turned to Thompson. Major, you consistently questioned assumptions and advocated for alternative perspectives. That's critical thinking that makes effective leadership. Thompson felt simultaneously relieved and terrified. Being praised by a 3-star general was career-enhancing. Being praised for contradicting his commanding officer in front of that general was potentially career-ending. Captain Rodriguez, Lieutenant Colonel Barnes, you both showed discomfort with today's conversation direction, but neither was willing to speak up when witnessing inappropriate treatment of someone you believed had no power to defend themselves. That's leadership failure with serious operational consequences. Victoria closed her notebook. Here's what happens, Colonel Davis. You'll report to General Sullivan's office at 1400 hours today. Your comments about diversity, civilian capabilities, and appropriate treatment indicate need for immediate leadership development and bias recognition training. Davis nodded numbly, calculating career damage. Major Thompson, you'll join me for discussion about advanced leadership opportunities. Your willingness to question conventional thinking indicates potential for strategic-level responsibility. All of you will participate in comprehensive base leadership climate review. This includes input from all levels: civilian volunteers, support staff, enlisted personnel. She stood, civilian clothes somehow failing to diminish the command presence radiating from her frame. Gentlemen, the Army is evolving. Modern military effectiveness requires leaders who recognize talent regardless of packaging, ability to see beyond surface appearances and initial assumptions. Victoria looked at each officer. Today, you had opportunity to demonstrate those qualities. Some succeeded, others did not. This morning's incident will become a case study in leadership development programs throughout the Army. Not because Colonel Davis failed to recognize a general, but because he failed to treat another human being with basic dignity and respect. Thompson raised his hand. General, what happens now to base operations? Now we implement real changes, not just policy statements. Victoria pulled out her official Pentagon phone. Fort Campbell becomes a pilot program for inclusive leadership development. Will prove military effectiveness increases when every person is valued for actual contributions rather than perceived status. The volunteer program will be expanded and formalized. Civilian expertise in logistics, technology, administration will be systematically integrated. Most importantly, we'll train leaders to recognize and develop talent wherever they find it. As she walked away, still wearing her volunteer badge, 4 officers sat in stunned silence, each contemplating how a simple coffee break had fundamentally changed their understanding of leadership, assumption, and hidden potential in every person around them. 6 months later, the general in the cafeteria had become Army folklore. Colonel Davis received transfer to logistics at Fort Leonard Wood, effectively ending promotion possibilities. His evaluation included bias recognition, training recommendations, and supervision requirements. But the impact went far beyond one officer's career. Major Thompson was promoted to lieutenant colonel ahead of schedule and assigned to Pentagon strategic planning, where his demonstrated ability to question assumptions proved invaluable. Captain Rodriguez and Lieutenant Colonel Barnes received additional leadership development, specifically focused on moral courage required to speak up when witnessing inappropriate treatment. The Fort Campbell incident became centerpiece of new Army-wide leadership program called Hidden Strength. The program focused on teaching officers to recognize talent regardless of packaging, understanding that military effectiveness depended on seeing beyond surface assumptions. General Victoria Hayes received her 4th star 18 months later, becoming one of the highest-ranking Latina officers in Army history. Her promotion ceremony was held at Fort Campbell with hundreds in attendance. Leadership requires humility to recognize that wisdom can come from unexpected sources, she said. It requires courage to question your own assumptions, especially about the worth and capability of other human beings. The volunteer program at Fort Campbell expanded to include former executives, retired teachers, skilled tradespeople whose civilian expertise enhanced base operations in ways traditional military training sometimes couldn't address. But the most significant change was cultural. The incident sparked Army-wide conversations about respect, assumption, and hidden potential in every person. Officers questioned their biases more carefully. Enlisted personnel felt more valued. Civilian staff experienced improved treatment and greater integration. The goal wasn't to embarrass anyone or prove points about hidden identities. General Hayes explained to a military leadership conference. The goal was creating military leaders who see people clearly, value contributions based on merit rather than appearance, and understand that our strength comes from recognizing and developing talent wherever we find it. Fort Campbell's cafeteria installed a small plaque near the coffee station. Leadership is best measured not by how you treat those with power over you, but by how you treat those who appear to have no power at all. Every morning, service members and civilians sharing coffee were reminded that everyone around them carried stories, experiences, and capabilities that couldn't be judged by uniform, job title, or first impression. Sometimes the person serving your coffee had shaped international military strategy. Sometimes the quiet observer had insights that could transform operations. Sometimes the most powerful leader in the room was the one everyone underestimated. Thank you for typing respect. Subscribe for more stories where true leadership reveals itself when people think no one important is watching. Support our mission through Buy Me Coffee link in first pinned comment. Until next time, remember, never underestimate quiet strength.